I first met our speaker in 1981 when he was 9 years old, a second former at Rumsey. By the time he was a senior, there wasn't much he'd left on the table. And then off to Exeter, where he ended up being elected school president. Jon chose Cal Berkeley for his undergraduate degree before earning an MBA from the prestigious Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. And I know what you're thinking right now. An elitist academic snob. You could not be further from the truth. Jon attended all of his schools, including Rumsey Hall, thanks to financial aid. In between college and graduate school, he served full-time with City Year in Boston and Chicago. City Year is a youth service leadership development organization that volunteers in some of the poorest school districts across the country. Jon gives back. It's important to note that each one of Jon's academic institutions had a different culture. Each was located in a different geographic setting. You see, Jon is an adventurer, a stick-your-neck-out kind of guy. Humble and self-effacing, yet, for good reason, highly confident. We asked him to speak at graduation 2 years ago, but he declined. The Little League team he coaches made it to the championships, and he couldn't let his guys down. Jon has his priorities right. Jon's pretty important now, but 27 years ago, he was you, sitting with his silly friends in the front rows at his graduation, worn out from exams, the dance the night before, and staying up late talking with his buds. Jon's a middle child in a talented family. You know, that no man's land growing up, the middle child? Well, he's not in no man's land now. His apartment is steps away from the Pacific Ocean in Manhattan Beach, California. He can hear and see the surf outside his window. The last time I visited Jon, he told me a group of young college graduates had taken over the apartment underneath his. I said, gosh, that's too bad. They must be a real distraction. Jon looked at me like I was crazy. Jon is a private wealth manager at Morgan Stanley, and he's really, really good. We couldn't get one of those college dropout social media tycoons from California to speak today. So we got the guy who manages their fortunes. No kidding, Jon was the quarterback when Facebook went public. But today he's our lovable, talented, spirited boy who quoted Ferris Bueller in his yearbook at Rumsey, returning to share a bit of what he's learned. Please welcome Jon back to his alma mater.
It's good to be here today. Hopefully everybody can hear me in the back. All right, I got a yes. By the way, I apologize to the students who've had to see photos of me, like a wanted sign from the FBI. If you can't recognize me, Mrs. Farman, when they asked me to speak, Mrs. Farman immediately jumped in and said, "Make it funny, Newey," calling me by my childhood nickname. Gotta love Mrs. Farman. Always setting that bar very high and saying exactly what she means. Senior class, she's done that for you, I'm sure, many a time. We love her for that, and trust me, she will do that from here on forward. Shakespeare said, many a true word is said in jest. Today we want to have fun. As your classmate Benji noted, do not take life so seriously, you'll never get out alive. I will borrow some of your senior quotes to honor you today. I did some research for this. While some of my comments will be in jest, more of them will be of personal note, and I hope you'll still enjoy them. We do celebrate today, but it is a bit of an ending. Lily, by the way, there are a lot of Lilies in your class. Lily quoted Robert Frost. In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Katie made the necessary Dr. Seuss reference. Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. Now, at my graduation, I don't recall who spoke. I don't remember what he said. I don't remember what he looked like. The poor guy probably worked on it for a year. On my graduation day, see, at Rumsey, I had these glasses, but they had tape on them. I was a dorky looking guy. I had no luck with girls. Mrs. Farmer would say nothing has changed. What I do recall is that I was hoping that day I'd get lucky, like a lot of the guys are probably hoping that I get that big kiss from Holly or Claire or Molly. I walked in with hopefulness that day, like Jenna said, wherever you go, go with all your heart. No one stepped up. I'm not mad about it though. Haven't carried that with me at all. So this goes on YouTube. I walked away with a couple of other things, maybe a diploma or maybe an award or two. When I look at them, I think of the stories and the images of things that I did here, of the stories of the friends that I spent time with, the classes that we had and the teams that we played on. Over time, we collect things in our pockets, in our wallets. I'm not talking about the credit cards or the cash, because in the end, oftentimes money, and I manage money for a living, oftentimes it just buys us a better seat on the airplane or at a restaurant or at the game. What will you do once you get there? Will you squander the opportunity? People won't remember where you sat, but they'll remember what you did when you got there. If you're really good, they won't even have to memorialize you. Jack, you put it very well. When I'm dead, I'd rather have people ask why I have no monument than why I have one. So what will your legacy be? Grace quoted the great Benjamin Franklin. Either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. Let me share a few of the things that I carry and see what that tells you about what you'll carry from here. One of my prized possessions, you won't be able to see them all, but one of my prized possessions is a coin from Mike Thornton. Mike Thornton was a U.S. Navy SEAL. He shook my hand once and he handed this to me, thanking me for the support that I give veterans. Mike Thornton received the Medal of Honor for his service in the war in Vietnam. Mike was is an amazing man. Stands 6 feet tall, barrel-chested. Man literally took 20 rounds in an 8-hour firefight, and at the end of it, carried 2 men on his back, one who he had to run back to get, and then swam out into the ocean and stayed there for 2 hours in enemy waters waiting for someone to pick him up, and finally was picked up. Talk about being all in. It made me think of a couple of things, but when you think of the training that he went through and that he wouldn't leave his men behind, maybe think of a couple of quotes from your classmates. Calvin, somebody may beat me, but they're going to have to bleed to do it. Delaney, successful people replace the words wish and should and try with I will. I love Delaney, that was Calvin. Delaney, Jenny, Winston Churchill. This is one of my favorites. When you're going through hell, keep on going. Never, never, never give up. I have in my wallet also my father's return address label to remind me of him. Like yours, my parents made it possible for me to be here, and as Mr. Farman mentioned, the generosity of Rumsey and other parents made it possible for me to be here. I come back here today to say thank you. Today, thank your parents, thank your family. In August, when the excitement of today is worn off, thank your parents. Most of all, 10 years from now, and you think back, you say, man, that was cool to go to Rumsey. Thank you so much. I grew up here in Washington, so I was a day student. My parents grew up in Wisconsin, so I grew up a Packer fan. I'm a Packer owner, as Mr. Farman, who's a Giant fan, will tell you. The Pack have the most titles of like any football team in the history of mankind. So, Will, you're a man after my admiration when you quoted the great coach Vince Lombardi when you said, if winning isn't everything, why did they keep score? But there's a different quote that I actually have in my office that I would point to, which Coach Lombardi had a different meaning to later on in life. He said, I believe that a man or woman's finest hour, his greatest fulfillment to all that he holds dear, is that moment when he has worked his heart out in a good cause and he's exhausted on the field of battle, victorious. Coach later said it was the work that led to the exhaustion, not the W, that mattered most. I carry a business card, and obviously there's a title on it, and that speaks to achievement. And at Rumsey, We measure everything. It starts at the beginning of the day. Who's here? And it goes on. Pluses, minuses, effortless. We had blackballs back then. Thankfully, I avoided those. Points for reds and blues, wins, losses, ribbons, letters. Today you get a diploma. I know for a fact, and I know this even though I lived out in California, but each of you have probably counted how many times you walked up the hill when the campus center was being built for a meal. And then you counted how many times you had to walk back to class, uphill. See, you're going to tell your kids, I walked uphill 8 times a day for a meal. And then I walked back uphill to class. Uphill both ways. Trust me, you're going to do it. You're not going to do it now, but you're going to do it later on. But while you were doing that, when you look back on the speech, you're going to remember that. What did you learn along the way? I loved Henry's reference, who reflected sometimes about the struggle, about the learning process. Dear math, please grow up and solve your own problems. I'm tired of trying to solve them for you. But what did you learn? It's Stanley Cup playoffs. By the way, go Rangers. Charlotte quoted the great one himself, who, by the way, looked best in blue and not Ranger black, or Kings black. Charlotte, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it has been. Jack borrowed from the great Thomas Edison. Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. I also have in my wallet, and I collect these, I voted stickers every time I vote. You have to show up. Mr. Farman mentioned it. I served in City Year, a youth service corps, which is like the Peace Corps. Part of our symbol was 7 triangles, which represents 7 generations. The third the middle triangle, the fourth, was your generation. So senior class, you're the middle triangle. You're standing on the shoulders of the 3 generations that came before you, that have already graduated. And behind you are generations that are coming on that are going to be standing on your shoulders. You carry that legacy with you when you go on to schools here forward. Whatever you do from here today will reflect upon Rumsey Hall. Think of that. And everybody behind you, remember, you're benefiting from those who are standing in front of you today, sitting in front of you today, and will be receiving a diploma. I also have this is a ball marker, and it's a Wounded Warriors ball marker. I was in a tournament a couple of years ago, and afterwards it was a fundraiser, and I was throwing just these things for the fundraiser afterwards, and I got a call the next day, and they said, "Hey John, you won the beauty kit." I thought, well, I obviously put something in the wrong jar. I have no idea. I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but could you do me a favor and maybe give it to the woman who did this quilt that I lost, but this Wounded Warrior did this beautiful patriotic quilt. I said, just give it to her and just say thank you. I don't remember what her name was, but pass it along. And thankfully, a couple of days ago, she sought me out and called me and said thank you. And I said, well, would you do me a favor and do a couple of small miniature copies of that quilt so I could frame them and write a note about what you did and why you do the quilts, because I want people to know your story. But she's a hero to me. And one of your classmates quoted Michael Jordan, the great basketball player. Your Michael Jordans or your Barbara Newstroms, the Iraq War veteran for me, they're your heroes. Your heroes, I should say, are your teachers and your coaches. So today at Rumsey or in the future at your future schools, I want you to remember to thank your Michael Jordans, your Barbaras. I also have a Luger's card and a Ben and Jack's phone number. These are steakhouses in New York City where I go to meet Rumsey Hall friends of mine, and also friends of my older brother who still wail on me today like they did back at Rumsey. I might ask for it. I might quote something like your classmate Bill did, and I might try to be smarter than them like I did back then. I might say, if there's anything the nonconformist hates worse than a conformist, It's another nonconformist who doesn't conform to the prevailing standard of nonconformity. I had to read that a couple of times myself, and I thought I was pretty smart. Then I thought, Delando. Delando. Immature is a word the boring people use to describe fun people. From that sage prophet, Will Ferrell. Now, I actually live in LA, so I thought Will Ferrell. Awesome. At this moment, your parents are thinking, oh no, he's going to mention Will Ferrell quotes. Brooke said, I may be crazy, but all the best people are, so absolutely I am. There are a few things that we can learn from the great Will Ferrell. So, for example, when you're mad, what do you say? Son of a bee sting! Or, son of a nutcracker! Or, dietary recommendations. We've all seen Elf. So you want to say candy, candy canes, candy corn, syrup. These are the food groups. Remain childlike. Always remain childlike. Santa, I know him, I know him. Or confidence. And this is definitely something you want to do when you go off to school next year. Do it maybe on your own, but look in the mirror and say, I don't know how to say this, but I look pretty awesome today. Before I end with a brief exercise, there are some great ways to begin the day, just for the heck of it. Say as Daria would say, Kuna Matata. Or take Sabrina's advice. If you have nothing else to offer me your smile. Do as Liverpool tells us by way of J-Woo. If you do those things, you'll never walk alone. Perhaps my own personal favorite, as referenced by Mr. Farman. Emmeline, you borrowed my quote actually. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. See, in the end, you wrote this speech for me. You will write your story from here. On the school website, you'll see the building of the campus center to the bird song, Turn, 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 which is to Ecclesiastes, which encapsulates every emotion in life, the beginning to the end, and the highs and the lowest of the lows. So for a moment, seniors, I want you to take a photograph in your mind, just an image, as I mentioned something that I want you to think back on your days at Rumsey. For example, I want you to think of the first day that you showed up here, maybe a little scared. What comes to mind? Or think of your favorite meal. Maybe you didn't have to do plates. I hated doing plates. Or trash, because that means you had to leave late, and your friends could go off, and you had to find them on campus. Maybe you're a little mischievous. Back in the day, that was throwing butter packets on the ceiling, and then during the winter, and then when it melted, they'd fall and they'd be butter bombs in the spring. You're not allowed to do that in the new campus center, by the way. If you do, Mrs. Farman will come and beat me up. She will. Think of a teacher. Think of a moment when Mr. or Miss whomever pushed you beyond what you thought you could do. Think of when you were tested, when you were really tested in the classroom, or on the field, or in a friendship. Maybe when you cried, or when you celebrated, like the ringing of the bell with the big win over Indian Mountain. I still remember those days. Think of when you stood up for something that you believed in, or you laughed absolutely uncontrollably in the dorm, on the team bus, the Bromley trip, in study hall when you're doing everything you could to be quiet, particularly when Mr. Spooner was running it. Those are the worst. Or you found your voice in a cappella or a captain's speech, or ironically in air band. I remember that day. Where you helped someone find theirs. You moved on, you moved up, you moved through a class, through a season, through a form. You danced. Like it was Disney's happiest place on earth. See, what you've done, the legacy you have written for yourself, for your class, your school. Alex, you have it with Walt. Around here, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things. It's all in our school motto. Qui non profici deficit. Class of 2014, Congratulations, all in.